So we're going to run through a quick setup and maintenance on the loco. The loco comes separately on its pallet. Once you've taken it off the pallet and got it onto the rails, the first thing you've got to do is to actually attach the tender to it. So we have the tender separately here. The control system is permanently wired in to the back end of the locomotive, although it is mounted on the tender. So we're going to mate the tender to the loco, and then we're going to attach the control system to the inside of the tender. That's step one. The tender has a mechanical handbrake. Once you've got it on the rails off of its packing, if you unscrew the mechanical brake, the tender's light enough that you can roll it into position and we can put the couplers together. Much the same as you did with the rolling stock, the coupler bar has to stay with the locomotive because of the cabling, but actually you put it together in the same way. So you grease your N12 nut, bolt, pop that through, nylock on the bottom, keeping everything nice and loose so it moves about, and then on with your shackles and safety chains. That attaches the locomotive to the tender. The controller has 6 mounting holes, 6 holes on the side of the tender. We're going to put those on with 3mm pan heads. Just screw that into position once the coupler is in place. The idea is that the tender and the locomotive are never to part, but if you want to, you can unscrew the controller, undo the couplers, and then you can actually have the locomotive as a completely separate item should you need to for maintenance. Once the locomotive's turned up to you, you're going to have to take the bonnet section off, because the battery is one large traction battery all held together as one solid lump. You want to make sure it hasn't shifted very much inside the bonnet. It is held in place, but it can shift side to side, which will upset the balance a little bit. To do this, you undo the screws that hold this bonnet section on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on each side. Once you've taken all of the screws out on both sides, this whole bonnet section lifts off. It's heavy, it's got some really big castings in it, so you're going to need 2 people to do that. That will give you access to the battery tray. The smoke box also opens. Unscrew it in a traditional manner, just like a normal locomotive. That will give you access to the smoke box, which has the sound system and smoke machine in it. I'm going to take the top off now and we can have a look at the batteries. So this is your traction battery. It's a lot of cells all held together to make your one big traction battery. All of the transparent pipework you can see on the top is actually the Autofill system for the battery. And the idea behind that is, if you need to top up the batteries, you can do it in one simple way. So we have a pump here which you put distilled water into, and then once you want to plug it in, it has a special plug in here, and a plug here. You plug the two together, you give the handle 2 or 3 pumps, and you'll see this little guy here starts spinning around. You can see the water going in, and the water runs around the system, topping up all of the batteries. When you know they're at the right height, all of these little white dots pop up. So you can do this with the bonnet section on, but we suggest if you do that, you really want to put a torch down to look inside, because one of these little plastic pipes can pop off and then you're squirting water everywhere. So you just need to make sure that doesn't happen. Once you're happy that the batteries are nice and central to the locomotive, then there's no reason why you can't carry on with the cabling and wiring. This big green Anderson plug is your main battery cable. So you have a choice when you're charging to either plug in the control system, or when you want to charge, you pull out the control system and then you plug in your charger. This keeps the batteries and the control system completely separate. So your batteries are topped up, they're central, you're happy with it. You've got your controller over here mounted properly on your tender, nice and solid. You have actually got a little clip to keep this cable back here. You'll have to screw that into position to hold it into position, just so it doesn't become a trip hazard for your driver. It's better to leave this excess cable, because should you need to take the handset off, you need a little bit of length on it. You're actually now in a position where you can turn the electrics on the loco if you want to. But first we need to just do the rest of the maintenance on the loco and tender. Mounted in the smoke box is a smoke machine. This should need very little maintenance from you guys. You actually fill it through the tube on the top. So you just put a funnel into here, fill it with straight tap water, a litre at a time. It should run for about an hour to an hour and a half just on that. Also mounted in the smoke box is one of the speakers from the sound unit. This shouldn't need any maintenance at all. You can open and close the door as you would do on a proper steam loco. All the mechanical parts on the locomotive need to be oiled. So although they're dummy, the piston rods are in bronze, the crossheads, most importantly the coupling rods at both ends will need to be oiled every time you use the locomotive. So we're going to do that now. Come to the other side of the loco, it's a bit easier for you to see what's going on. So, good quality engine oil, all moving parts, crossheads, fake piston valves, really got to get in, make sure you oil the coupling rods properly. Connecting rods and coupling rods will need oiling every time you run. So a good slug of oil on all of those mechanical parts on both sides of the loco. The chains are behind these two chain guards, top chain guard and the bottom chain guard. If you look on the top, we've got oiling points, so you can put your oil can through and you can put oil onto the chain. That needs to be done every time you run on a daily basis. If you look down inside, you'll see the duplex chain. Then on that lay shaft there is your second chain that runs to the rear axle. This needs to be oiled on a daily basis as well. These chains are very, very strong and hard wearing, but they will eventually stretch, and then you'll have to adjust those to take the slack out of them. So you want to keep your eye on them, make sure they don't get too slack. A bit of slack is absolutely fine, you're going to need it, but you don't want them to be flapping about. Much the same as you did on the bogies, the maintenance that's needed on the tender is greasing on these plumber blocks, because they'll move up and down. You also want to put a little bit of grease on any moving parts on the braking system. You can use oil grease lasts a bit longer. You'll probably be wanting to check that they're greased, especially for the first few times you run them. Then you probably want to be doing it something like once a week, but we'll give you a maintenance schedule which will tell you all of this. So just drop a funnel in, 1 litre of water, it has an automatic overfill, so if you do overfill it you will see water draining out the bottom of the loco, but don't worry, that's just so you don't get too much in the smoke machine. So you checked your battery levels, you've oiled both sides of the locomotive, you've oiled the tender, you checked all your couplers are in place, safety chains. Really at this point you should be putting the bonnet section back on, screwing that down, polishing up the brass. You've filled the water for the smoke machine, then we can get on to the actual controls and get this working.